evening, everybody. Kamari Ellis here. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about Martin Luther King, his life, his legacy, his works. Just want to get on here for a quick minute and just talk a little bit. Of course, it is the 31st day of the government shutdown. Trump announced some things that he planned on doing, but the Democrats don't like his proposal, and it's going to be a very interesting next couple of weeks. We're already seeing some slowdown in the economy. Remember, we got over 800,000 people and their families who are not generating income. Many of them are being forced to come back to work, IRS, Department of Agriculture. But just think about that. Think about being made to come back to work. You got to pay for gas. You got to pay for all the transportation. You got to pay for everything else. But the government doesn't care. Life goes on. We're already seeing some slowdowns at the airport. Air flights are starting to back up some. So that's going to be an issue. That's going to be a big, big issue. I talked about that yesterday when I went live as well. So I'm really going to be interested to see how these next couple of days / weeks go. But I don't know. The other interesting thing that happened I saw this morning is that Rudy Giuliani, President Trump's personal lawyer, admitted that Trump or the campaign was actively talking about Russia deals, ideally the whole Russia hotel, the Moscow hotel. So I bring it up because a lot of times people wonder, why do I talk about politics so much? I talk about politics because politics inherently has an impact on finance. They are both linked. You can't get rid of it. It is what it is. So we always have to be on the lookout for it. So now that Rudy Giuliani is saying that they were talking about the Moscow project up until the election, somewhere between October and November, I wouldn't be surprised if that brought a little bit more fear into the market, a little bit more uncertainty into the market. So I'm waiting to see some of the shenanigans that go on in this administration. So I'm just sharing some stuff out here. I wanted to share this message. It's funny, every MLK day, I feel like I should talk about MLK. And ironically, growing up, I wasn't the biggest MLK fan. I was more of a Malcolm X fan. But as I got older and I studied more, I realized that MLK did a lot. I think a lot that he does not get the recognition and credit for. And I think sometimes he gets dogged out unnecessarily. Just my opinion. But I just want to talk about that, especially his thoughts around Black wealth and business. So give me 2 seconds. So the other thing, before I get to that, I wanted to talk about was I watched Triggered Warnings today. Now, if anybody doesn't know what Triggered Warnings is, it's the new project by Killer Mike that is on Netflix. It's absolutely genius. It's a wonderful piece of art. It's a wonderful working about the Black community. He talks a lot about Black business. Ironically, he's from Atlanta, right? Where MLK did most of his work, or a lot of his work. But what I find really interesting is that Killer Mike talked about Black business in the very, very first episode. So he went 3 days without buying anything that was not produced by Black. And so the food that he was buying had to be produced, made in the kitchen by Black folks, all the way to the farm. So he was trying to do that. And ironically, his attempt to buy Black, from, again, buying food, to lodging, to transportation, was so bad that the man had to sleep on the park. He couldn't get anything. If anybody knows anything about Killer Mike, he's a big weed smoker. So he wouldn't smoke weed for those 3 days because he said the growers of weed, marijuana, cannabis, aren't Black. So he would not buy any weed. So it was very interesting. And it gave him a better insight of how economics works, economics, especially in the Black community. And so he did that. It was hilarious. He added a lot of his character into it. If you follow Mike at all, he's very much a jokester. But he's very thoughtful. He's very, very smart. And I saw all that reflected in this project. I would suggest all of y'all who are watching me today to watch this. And I would love to hear your commentary on it. Some of it's a little wacky. Some of it's a little out there. But it's all to make a point. It's all to make a big point. And I hope everybody gets it when they watch it. Some of the reviews I've seen so far, everybody seems to like it. There's a couple who don't like it, but it was just interesting how he interwove, just the Black ecosystem, from politics to wealth. One of the things he did was he was able to get the Crips and the Bloods in Atlanta to kind of unite and do some things together. So I thought it was really interesting. I thought it was really, really clever. And it's funny, I'm going to talk about this a little bit, but when I saw this, I started thinking about Maggie Anderson, who is the author of Our Black Year. I don't know. Has anybody read Our Black Year? If you've read it, put a 1 in the comment section. And if you haven't read it, put a 2. Put a 1 in the comment section. If you've read it, put a 2 in the comment section. If you have not read it, I'm really interested to see who's read it. But Maggie Anderson, who I've interviewed several times, did an experiment. She went a whole year without, she went a whole year buying black. So it was very challenging. Now, let me define buying black. Okay. She brought black through her discretionary funds, basically all her money that was left over. All right. So after her paying her mortgage, car note, utility bills, after that, she made sure everything she spent was black. She had a hard time doing it. She had a hard time finding a supermarket. Killer Mike had a hard time finding a supermarket as well. And I find that interesting, that you would think in Atlanta was almost like the new Black Mecca. You would be able to find it. Now, he did find one, and it's a store that's owned and operated by the Nation of Islam. And the Nation of Islam, led by Minister Louis Farrakhan, a lot of times people don't recognize some of the work that they're doing behind the scene. But not only did they own the grocery store, they also owned the farm that they were buying food from. So, yeah, Lysandra, the book is awesome. You should read it. I have an interview floating around with Maggie, and I will post it somewhere. I think it's on SoundCloud. I have to find it. But again, it was this problem finding Black folks to buy from, Black folks to support, especially in some of the more challenging areas to enter into. So it can be a bit challenging when you're trying to strengthen your community. And so Maggie's whole thing was basically only 2%. Wait a minute, let me back up. Let me say this correctly. The Black community only spends approximately 2% of their discretionary money in the Black community with Black-owned businesses. Now, Killer Mike's criteria for buying black was a bit more stringent than that. And I think that's a little bit more, it's a lot harder, and it's actually probably unrealistic in a lot of instances. But if you look at Maggie's approach to it, where, if you're going to buy black, go to the black car salesman at the used dealer, at the new car dealership. If you're going to buy black, get a black insurance agency. There's not really many life insurance agencies around anymore. There used to be a bunch. Another book that I would suggest you all read is Black Titan by A.G. Gaskins. I actually did a review on that book. It's a wonderful book. A.G. Gaskins was a gentleman who grew up during the Jim Crow South in Birmingham, and I want to say in Birmingham, Alabama, and what's the other big city in Alabama? I can't think of it off the top of my head. But he became a billionaire during Jim Crow era, and he had a life insurance company. There were several other life insurance companies over the years, but they're kind of all gone now. But at the very least, you can at least work with a competent Black life insurance agency, right? So anyway, Maggie's research has showed that the Black community only spends 2% of its discretionary income in the Black community on Black businesses. If we were to merely raise that up to 10%, we could employ 1 million people overnight. Now, mind you, this is roughly a $1.2 trillion spend, right? Black folks in the United States of America spend roughly $1.2 trillion between salary and between credit cards. So it's not all income. Some of it is credit when you dig into the numbers. If you knew that, put a one in the box. If you knew Black folks in America was generating 1.2 trillion, put a one in. If you didn't know that, put a two in the box. I'm really interested to see how everybody's keeping pulse of all this. But, so Mike went on ahead that and talked about that. Maggie talked about that in her book. And I find it interesting that Mike dropped that his project, again, Triggered Warnings on Netflix on January 18th. January 18th. Today is Martin Luther King's, holiday. Martin Luther King's birthday is actually January 15th. We normally celebrate it on the third Monday of every month. But it came out just in time for MLK Day weekend. So I got to watch that. And again, I thought it was really, really interesting. But I always wonder, how many people are really thinking about how much money we spend in other communities? How much money that goes away from our community to strengthen everybody else? Now, when Maggie Anderson, again, wrote this book, she got a lot of national press, a lot of national exposure, and a lot of people called her racist. I find it ironic that people would call her racist because the documentation is out there, the research is out there, right? So outside of government, the biggest employers of Black people are Black-owned businesses. Outside of government, especially federal government. That's one of the reasons why government shutdown is so bad. 18% of government employees, roughly 18% of government employees are Black folks. So I've seen some people say, well, how does government really impact Black people? But 18% of folks are Black. So 18% of those 800,000 people and their families and all the other surrounding businesses that support them are Black, roughly. But I found it interesting that they would call Maggie a racist. I find it mind-boggling that anytime anybody supports anything pro-Black or not necessarily going along with status quo, I've been really botching my words, that's not going along with status quo, it's demonized. So I found that really interesting. Again, I found it interesting with Killer Mike's project because I'm sure there's going to be some kind of backlash to talk about it being racist or to talk about it excluding white folks. But actually, he didn't exclude white folks. So, or transgender or the LGBTQI community. He included them as well. I don't want to give too much of it away. I want you all to go watch it because it's a great read. For all of you that are just joining, or if you're joining on a replay, my name is Kamari Ellis. Many people call me the Finance Rebel. If you are just joining, please like, share, comment. I'm doing this live on Instagram and Facebook, so I'll be taking most of your questions and comments after I get done talking through my talking points. But again, be sure to share this. I find that a lot of us aren't talking a lot about Black wealth. It's starting to pick up more now, but I think it's something we have to be conscious about talking about and deliberate about talking about, because if we're really serious about strengthening our community, we got to strengthen our Black businesses in that community, because just like I said, the biggest employers of Black folks outside of the government are Black-owned businesses. And mind you, here's another factoid on MLK Day weekend. Black unemployment has usually always been double that of the national average since the March on Washington, since before the March on Washington. Now, they weren't necessarily keeping track before that, but ever since then, Black unemployment has been double. So we're talking over 50 years here. So I wouldn't say that's a blip or an anomaly, right? Anomaly. I would say that's something that's very systemic. There's something wrong with the system. I know myself, I've sent out resumes in the past. They've seen my name, and I kind of got thrown off the stack. I wasn't even considered. I only was able to know that because I knew somebody inside that was kind of able to give me a bit more of the inside track and was able to kind of help me out. Didn't get the job, didn't really want it, but I just found that whole experience very interesting because, again, discrimination is real. Bias is real. And the sooner we acknowledge it's real, the sooner on we could make plans and move forward. whichever way you want to go. All right. I choose to support Black-owned businesses. A lot of people, I think some of the people that are on here now recognize that I've done that. I've done a lot of cash mobs. Those are some things you all can do as well. I'll talk about that as we get a little further down. But again, if you have not read Maggie Anderson's book, and if you haven't watched Killer Mike's Trigger Warning, I will suggest everybody do it. I think you'll be totally entertained and potentially enlightened. All right. So some of the things with MLK Day, right? MLK Day. A lot of people still, to this day, call Martin Luther King a sellout. To this day, many people say Martin Luther King was a quote unquote integrationist. And he has said as much as being an integrationist, right? So I can't really debate that, but I want to talk about that a little bit because I find that many of us, we're so surface a lot of times, right? And I'm speaking generally, but we're so surface many times. We don't delve into the nuance. We don't delve into the fine points of a thing. You know, you always hear people say the fine print, right? Devils in the detail, the fine print. I say God's in the detail of the fine print. I don't like talking about the devil too much, but God's in there because all the opportunity is in there, all the knowledge is in there, all the understanding usually is in the fine print or the details or the nuance, whichever way you want to call it. And so when you go back and you look at MLK's life, the one thing he was fighting for was access. So if you remember, Black folks are redlined. And if you don't know what redlined is, look it up. But you know what? I'll give you a quick description. Redlining was when the government literally would take red lines around Black communities and say, and poor communities, but especially Black communities. And they would say, we can't lend here and we're not going to grant insurance in these areas. So much of the Black experience, much of the oppressive Black experience in this country was dealt out by the government. I think many of us know that. I'm being a bit rhetorical, but I feel like it needs to be said because I don't think people really get that at many times. So we couldn't live in certain areas. So we were always relegated to having the worst schools or the worst conditions. Now, right, wrong, or indifferent, right? Because I've gone through several phases of this. At one point, I thought desegregation was probably the worst thing ever because we stopped supporting Black-owned businesses. We stopped really kind of being a community to a large extent. But us being desegregated had nothing to do with our overall culture and how we treated one another. So when you go back and you look at those times, you have to think about that as well. Desegregation didn't change how we saw one another, how we loved one another. That just gave us the ability to move to different neighborhoods and go to different schools and to have some other opportunities. At the same time, it was never, at least from a Black perspective, it was never to totally forget about your community, so to speak. But a lot of times that has happened and that's been well documented. But that's what King was fighting for. I mean, right now, today, I probably wouldn't be able to do a Facebook Live or Instagram Live had it not been the work for Martin Luther King and, the Ralph Abernathy's and Bunch and many of the other civil rights crusaders that were out there. And, they weren't perfect. That's well documented, but they've sacrificed way more than many of us do these days. So I feel like their history is beyond reproach. I feel like we can't really shame or demean or even really criticize, right? We can analyze, but I don't really feel we can truly criticize them because, one, we don't have enough perspective and context to really look back and really live in that era. I mean, can you really think about people not wanting to want you to ride the bus with them or to actively lynch? Now, lynchings are still going on today, but it's nowhere near like it was in previous years. So I think that's something you have to acknowledge. I think that's something you have to deal with. It was deeper than just Black folks wanting to sit at a lunch counter with white folks. It was so much deeper than that. Again, it was about mobility. Again, how many of us have traveled abroad? Can you imagine how hard that is? Would be with Jim Crow still coming through or being in place the way it is. I mean, a lot of times we have taken for granted a lot of the things, a lot of the privileges, a lot of the rights, a lot of the entitlements we currently have today. But I think some of the things with MLK's legacy, the way they portray his legacy, is also intentional as well. They always talk about turning the other cheek, but they never talk about his stance on black banking. And I shared something earlier today on both my Instagram and my Facebook timeline. Again, Kamari Ellis, if you're just joining us, be sure to like, comment, and share. Please share this out. We always need to have the conversation going about our history and our money, to be quite frank. We need to be about our money. We need to generate more conversations about our money. But back to MLK, there's some things when he talked about black wealth, black community, strengthening our financial institutions or our black institutions. I mean, he talked about those things, and he wasn't talking about we're just marching. So I pulled a couple of quotes, right? So this is one that struck me. He says, we have to strengthen our black institutions. I call upon you to take your money out of the banks downtown and deposit your money in Tri-State Bank. Tri-State Bank was a black bank. This was in Memphis, Tennessee. That's where he was talking about it at. Other thing he was talking about was black insurance. Now, I talked about black insurance companies a little bit earlier. He said you have 6 or 7 black insurance companies here in the city of Memphis. We want you to have insurance with those companies. Take out life insurance policies with those companies. So it wasn't just about marching. It wasn't just about sitting in on a lunch counter. It wasn't just about those things. And some people may say, well, he evolved over his lifetime and he moved closer to Malcolm X. Well, that's speculation, right? A lot of times I don't think we give credence enough or think enough about overall strategy. There was a lot of strategy when you see the pictures of the dogs attacking the quote unquote children. All of that was strategy. They knew all that was going to happen. They did it purposely because they wanted to get the world community involved. And I'm trying to think of the guy, the strategist behind it all. He's a gay man, and I don't say that to be attacking. I'm not attacking gays, but I say that to say that we don't talk about the nuance and how much gay people were actually instrumental in the civil rights movement. I'll look up his name. I'll look the gentleman's name up later. But a gay man designed that whole thing. Now, many people didn't like it, that march, that protest. I want to say it was at the bridge, the Petty Bridge in Selma. But many times people don't realize how much strategy, how much intention went to all of this stuff. Maybe MLK knew that he couldn't attack the black wealth issue or the black business issue until later on. Maybe he didn't think desegregation of the schools would bring about so much, let's call it black flight from black business, right? I mean, there were so many things that happened. Now, one of the things I will give the Nation of Islam credit for, one of the things I believe in is do for self. I will say that, do for self. Create your own business, control your own community, do all those things. You don't have to wait for anybody else. Do for self. But who's to say MLK wasn't at that point or basically couldn't see that, but course corrected later on. So I think you have to really put a lot of those things into context. You have to put a lot of those things into context and try to think about it from a broader lens than what you currently see on TV. And actually, read about it. Like I said, he's talking about black banks. He's talking about black insurance companies. He was talking about boycotting Coca-Cola and Wonder Bread and all of that. So part of it is also being conscious with your money. I call it being a conscious capitalist. You have to be conscious where you spend your money. A lot of us aren't conscious. Now, I had the thought of talking about this a couple of weeks ago, but I figured I would wait. And I had this thought because I had some clients that I do some financial coaching with, and I was going through their expenses. Some of their expenses, they don't spend any of their money with black-owned businesses. And for me, and I guess, just to be fair, I am a product of black-owned business. My father was a black-owned business. My whole journey through the financial services industry, large part was because I was able to work at black-owned businesses. So I've been kind of spoiled to a certain degree. And so I would say, honestly, I'm biased, right? So I feel like we should always seek black-owned people, qualified black-owned people. Don't hit me with there are no good businesses, right? There are plenty of great black-owned businesses. There are plenty of great businesses who just so happen to be black, right? Because, my belief is, yeah, we're black. There's no running away from that, but we should run great businesses. And if your target market is one that is not black, that's great. Get everybody's money, because 9 times out of 10, you're still going to hire black. And that money then comes back into the community. So, I would ask that we all be more mindful of how much money we spend on black folks. I know it can be inconvenient at times. I'm not telling you all to go to Antarctica or Timbuktu or anything like that. But if you could drive an extra 10, 15 minutes to go to a black-owned establishment, I would strongly advocate for you doing that. I'm a big Starbucks coffee drinker. I go there a lot. And I was being interviewed and somebody asked me, was I going to boycott Starbucks? And I told them no, because I said it was a one-time incident that lady at Starbucks had kind of done away with. And Starbucks actually is a big advocate for diversity. Many people don't realize that Starbucks gave a bunch of money to Cheney University as well to show that they're really serious about it. But what I also followed up and said in that interview was that I go to Uncle Bobby's all the time, which is owned by Dr. Mark Lamont Hill, as much as possible. And this is in the city of Philadelphia for those who are not here. I also go to Amalgam whenever I can, when I'm on that side of town, which is a black-owned comic book store who also sells coffee, right? So I do try to frequent these black-owned places. I do try to give these black-owned places, black-owned establishments shout-outs and bring awareness about them as much as possible. So if you can't make it that often, do a shout-out. Let people know. Help bring awareness about these places. One thing I was going to bring up earlier is I've actually organized several cash mobs. Now, people are probably asking, well, what's a cash mob? Well, tell me this. If you've heard of a cash mob, put a 1 in the comment section. If you have not heard of a cash mob, put a 2 in the comment section. I'm really interested to see who's heard of this. But a cash mob basically is you get 20 people together, you go to an establishment, you get them all to spend it at a minimum of $20 at that establishment. So I've done that several times. One bookstore, West Philly, Hakeem's bookstore, was going to go out of business. And a bunch of us, because it wasn't just me, so I'm not trying to sit here and say Kamari did it, I, me. It was a whole bunch of us that did this, was able to help keep that bookstore open and alive. We need efforts like that all around. The one thing I do commend Killer Mike for, again, going back to trigger warnings, is he had the brother Rafi and the brother Rafi from We Buy Black on there. And he basically showed him where you can buy black toothbrushes and black soaps and black cosmetics, right? We keep having all these corporations that blatantly disrespect black folks and show absolutely no sensitivity. And these aren't mom and pop shops. These are billion-dollar global multinational companies that spend a boatload of money of R&D. And some of them don't know that it's not good to do blackface, or some of them don't know that it's not good to portray black people as monkeys. Regardless to black participation in it or not, you would think people would understand that by now. So again, I would encourage all of us, my one ask, right? MLK Day, I've laid out how he clearly was pro-black wealth. He wasn't just about marching. He wasn't just about quote unquote integration, right? He was really about one. It's funny, I was listening, I'm going on a bit of a tangent, but just bear with me. He was really about black empowerment overall, right? Even more so than it's being portrayed, because he has said on a numerous of times, black is beautiful. Be a man, stand up for yourself. You've heard that same kind of messaging from every prominent, quote unquote, so-called pro-black advocate or activist. MLK should be regarded right up there with them. Was his message a little bit different? Absolutely. It was a different time. It shouldn't just be, it shouldn't just be, okay, let me say this. I think we run into problems a lot of times in many of our conversations by thinking that we have all the answers and all the solutions. And that's very closed-minded. Many times there's multiple ways to do a thing. And when you feel that it's just one way to do it, you've lost all objectivity. So just keep that in mind. But so this is my ask for everybody watching tonight, anybody you shared this with. Support Black-owned businesses, right? There's plenty of Black-owned accountants, Black-owned lawyers, Black-owned real estate agents, Black-owned car mechanics, Black restaurants, Black contractors, Black plumbers, Black electricians, Black computer folks, even HBCUs, even though technically HBCUs aren't Black-owned business. They do at least help to foster the Black community. And when you look at the research of how many PhDs in higher education folks, they're typically coming out of HBCUs. Now, tonight, I don't want to have the conversation about college as a scam or anything like that. But I do, again, want to stress that I would ask everybody to participate with supporting a Black-owned business. So Ahmad Lawton's on here, and I want to talk about Ahmad because Ahmad's cousin is like one of my best friends. And his grandmother is Mary Lawton. She's a very, very, very well-established accountant in the community. I actually love this family. They're like one of my favorite families. And the reason why I say they're one of my favorite families is because they get money together. Right now, I don't know all their business. I've had the privilege of working on some things with them. They don't have the same kind of drama that I see in a lot of other businesses or a lot of other families as well. They always figure out a way to make it work. And so what I would say with that, using them as an example, figure out how to try to make it work with some of our folks. There's a big myth going around saying that you shouldn't do business with your family. Sometimes that's absolutely true. Some of them just ain't ready. But some of your strongest businesses are family-owned businesses. Anybody that's in Philly, look at Wawa, or up and down the East Coast. That's a family-run business. Look at Walmart, family-run business. There are several others that started off as family-run businesses. And if you can't do business together, try to figure out a way to proactively and aggressively support them. If your grandma made great fried chicken or made great bean pies or sweet potato pies, support that strongly, aggressively. Let everybody know about it. And if it's whack, obviously let them know that, hey, we need to work on this for grandma. We need to tighten this up a little bit. But I see Algernon Allen's on. Buddy might not know him for years. He's a Black real estate agent. Done a lot of stuff here in the city. I respect Algernon a lot. Just from some of our conversations online, Algernon's had me see some of the things and look at it differently. I'll give you one right now. Say revolutions usually don't last. It's evolutions. So I say that to say is we have to be more patient with each other, right? So revolutions typically are quick. They go through. You might have some change, but the change usually doesn't last. Evolutions are slow. Evolutions take time. Evolutions take patience, but they typically are more long-lasting and sustaining. So think about that. Again, when you look at MLK, don't try to just go off the rhetoric that you see on mainstream media. Do a little bit more deep dive. Think about why COINTELPRO would send tapes of this man to his wife. Think about how just look up COINTELPRO, right? But think about all of this, and think about also, again, a lot of us dogged the civil rights movement, but all of those times, folks was getting together, folks was rallying. They were also spending time together. They were also bonding together. So try to figure out other ways to bond and do fellowship with others in your community as well. I know we all can't get along, but try to get along with those who are at least positive, who are at least trying to do some things positively for the community. But, that's about all I got to say today about MLK. I'm interested in all of y'all's thoughts on MLK. Let's see if we have any questions from here. Hey, Latia, how you doing? Lysandra, thanks everybody for joining. Algernon said, I remember when you did Cash Mile with Early Birds at my spot. Yeah, we. You know what? We did do one of these lanes. Yes. With the Early Birds, we try to support Black-owned business as much as possible. Let's see. Surface, what's up, Mike? Lolita, hey, Lolita. So I don't see any questions, but again, if you're just joining, watching the replay, drop the replay in there. Let us know if you have any comments. I'll be more than happy to respond. One thing I am doing is I'm starting a financial book club. So I want you all to join the Financial Rebel Book Club if you are interested in increasing your financial literacy. All you have to do is totally free. Just come on over to the Financial Rebel Academy. It's on Facebook. It's a group I have on Facebook. We talk about how to make money, how to increase our understanding of money. All you got to do is come on over, answer the questions to get into the group. If you don't answer the questions to get into the group, it's nothing personal. I'm just going to ignore it or delete it. Deborah, I am out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So again, first book will be Rich Dad Poor Dad, and we're going to start reading that on February 1st. But again, part of the reason I wanted to do this is I feel it's important to honor our ancestors. I wanted to come on here and talk about MLK and also the legacy. I think the best way to honor MLK is to support Black-owned business, support Black-owned professionals. That's one of the best ways because, again, as you do that, you will begin to strengthen or continue to strengthen, rather, Black institutions. And not just all business, even nonprofits. From the African American Museum here in Philly to the African American Museum in DC. There's plenty of good causes that need our support, that need our dollars. Okay. Deborah, yeah, I think we've talked a couple of times in some posts as well. Deborah, thanks for joining us this evening. Thanks to everybody for joining us this evening. But again, if anybody wants to increase their financial literacy, come on over to the Financial Rebel Academy, join the Financial Rebel Book Club. Every month, we'll be talking about a book. First book we're going to read this month is Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Share this with people who are interested in increasing their financial literacy. One of the biggest problems we have in our community is the lack of understanding of money. And I'll be honest, I don't even like the term financial literacy because it was a term created by the credit card companies to basically cover up their overcharging of people and their horrendous interest rates that they charge. But I know that's the most popular thing. So that's what we call it. But again, financial education is a must. We are going into the 22nd or the 21st century. The whole economy is changing. We're seeing all the tensions with China. We're going to continue to have more tensions with China, I believe, as we go forward. Everything's changing. We got to be prepared for this. We have to have a better understanding of money to be a better community. So again, anybody that has any comments, questions, thoughts, concerns, inbox me, DM me, and be sure to share this with somebody again who you think might need to think about Dr. Martin Luther King's legacy a bit deeper. So enjoy the rest of the holiday. We got a couple more hours left. If you haven't watched it, watch that triggered warnings. Read the book, Our Black Year with Maggie Anderson, or by Maggie Anderson. It's a wonderful read about Maggie's journey to buy black for one whole year. Killer Mike couldn't even do it for 3 days. But that's weird. Why did this flip? I don't know why I did that. So again, everybody, I'll be back more than likely tomorrow. I'm going to start doing more video. That was my 2019 resolution that I started way before New Year's because I don't really believe in resolutions. But I should be back tomorrow talking about something else. Again, if you have any questions, drop them in my inbox, put it in my DM. And I'll see you all soon. Have a great night.